Okay.
So, we're really working hard to try to get this done, that's all I can tell you. I know we've got some, I don't know if they're philosophical differences or just differences. It's not philosophical per se, just philosophically, we're not really in a different position. We're willing to look at it and consider it. But, to try to make some movement, we would be willing to go to the 2-year deal, which, as I understand it, means it's up next September 30, right? And then we're into just back to back to full book bargaining. So the wages would be as we proposed, but obviously that 3rd year would come off as we'd be bargaining for the 3rd year, right? So that 2.5 sort of, we cut the scale there, because we'll be bargaining for wages. On the retro, we're willing to retro the $1.73 at this point. Not the dollar, because that sort of was a ratification bonus, if you will, to get this thing ratified. We are willing to do, as part of this deal, the 80 versus 84. On the state money, we're willing to enter into an MOU to put the excess money dollar cut at 287, which I believe is the 2012 number, according to the reports we just looked at. But we don't want to say the 2012 number, we want a number. So there's no argument, no confusion, what they mean this, was it this, what report we look, 287. And then, so the city gets the first 287, anything in excess of that is split 50-50. And I guess we would do that effective for this coming year. I mean, you know, basically it'd be next year, whatever monies we get next year, would that be split? We don't want to reduce the contribution, because if we're looking at and bargaining more pension reform in a year, of course we'll be back here in what, 7-8 months, but we don't want to cut that and then we do pension reform and then, you know, it's sort of all part of it. So once we're looking at making changes on the pension reform side, we'd rather handle that altogether. Because if we, it's like your offers today, if we do decide to go to 3%, 20 and out, whatever it is, then we wouldn't necessarily do the cut in contributions. So we think the wiser way to approach that is to deal with it when we're dealing with the bigger picture. So the change in our proposal here to try to meet you halfway is to basically accept on the MOU side the excess money at 287, which is basically what you're asking us to do. So we're accepting half of your proposal to reduce the, have an MOU going down 287 from currently it's like 544, so pretty substantial decrease, and will result in excess money to be shared. And you know, that's real money. Right now, let's say it's $80,000 or $100,000 your share. Right now, that's money we're keeping and we can spend, basically giving that as an increase through the share plan to all the different members. So putting that in place. So that's where we think we can go. We think we can get that past the commission. And we'd like to get the raises in effect by going to the 2-year deal that you're asking for. That puts us back here in a year, which is a commitment by us that, you know, we're serious about it. We don't know where it ends up, we know that, but it's not just a reopener. It's our proposal that otherwise we'd go for 3 years. So by making this a 2-year situation, it puts everything on the table, which gives both sides the ability to maneuver and make proposals and all that stuff. So we hope it shows that we've got a commitment to seriously considering, making those changes. And we do think the wages are important. I know pension's important. We talked about maybe considering we take less wages, whatever, but first thing everybody looks at is wages. And first thing coming in here, it's like, well, you don't even pay what Benel pays or Flag or whoever it was. So first thing on its face people look at is wages, and we think it would be hurting our competitiveness at this point at least to say, okay, let's cut our offer in half and use that to fund the thing. So, but we're serious about looking at it for next year, and we're willing to go halfway on your proposal on the excess money.
I got a clarification question that came up in the other room. Does everybody on the pension plan now get the COLA? Or is it just the people? So everybody gets it? Because
everybody gets it as long as, and it starts 1 year after they've retired, so you have to be retired a full year.
Okay.
Right, so people generally don't get it in their first year of retirement.
Correct.
Right, because it comes around every October.
But tier 1 and tier 2,
But yes,
both
every
tiers
person
get
that retires from here forward currently is eligible for the 1% COLA each year.
Kelly, if I may, do you have the report that that we could just take a look at?
I was just looking at the 20.
12?
Well, this one's actually 2015. Yep. Because I didn't recall this. I mean, I need it back for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Department manager. Yes. I have it right now. Okay.
Do you want a copy of it?
Oh, we're gonna pull it up. I just want to see what you're here. So I do kind of have a clarification question on your proposal. So the majority of the bargaining unit that is contributing the 9% with the 2.7% multiplier, the city's position is you want them to keep paying the extra percentage in hopes that after we go back to negotiations that continues to fund and that you don't have to change it back. Did I understand that correctly? You want the people on the tier 2, the 2.7% multiplier, continue to pay the 9% because we're going to go back to the bargaining table in 2 years if it was accepted.
Well, let's start with the premise. That's what's been negotiated, what they've been paying is 9%. So if we're going to have pension reform, that is tied up into all that. So I don't want to say because we're doing that,
okay,
we don't want to go back or lower it then back up. It's been negotiated, and it's been 9% for whatever the last 10 years, or whatever it is. So that's what it is. We're just saying maintain that status quo until we are able to look at the big picture. So the proposal is maintain the 9%.
And is just in order of concern for the city, is it the multiplier, is it the drop? Which one is the big concern for the city? It sounds like, to me, it sounds like it's a multiplier.
I'm not sure I don't know if we can answer that can we? I don't
No.
think-
Right, and that's.
And you didn't, you just said the drop just now, but I don't recall any
You meant the
conversation
20
about the
now.
drop.
20 now.
Right,
20
you meant the 20 now, okay.
Right, that's, is it the multiplier they're funny now?
And that's part of the basis for wanting to do a study and spend spend some time looking at this, because we don't have all those calculations at each cost. And it's looking at this whole pension reform package that was negotiated 10 years ago and trying to figure out where can we go that's sustainable financially for the city? What can we do so we're competitive and still financially sound? You know, what is that? That's not
Right.
we can't answer that today. That's why we want to look at this.
The concern of the city isn't the 3% multiplier or the 20 and out. It's the cost of whatever benefit is being
Right.
requested
Understand.
on a long-term basis. So let's just say that cost is, $200,000 a year, right? That's what we're told today. We all know that in 3 years, the actuaries are gonna tell us, oh, we have to change the longevity, the mortality tables, right?
Right.
So when we told you it was gonna cost a certain amount, we assumed people were gonna live a certain period after they retired. But now that's changed, life expectancies have increased, so your costs now are gonna be 50% more than what we told you.
Okay.
And over the course of a pension plan, which is long-term, those types of changes keep happening, whether they're to the mortality tables, to the assumed rate of return versus the actual return. So that's really the city's biggest concern is we're trying to say yes to something that we don't really know what it's gonna cost.
Right.
It's like if I bought a house and the mortgage company said, well, it'll cost you $1,000 a month today, but we don't really know what it's gonna cost you in 2025 or 2026, right?
So like an
It's just-
decibel rate,
It just
1%.
creates a lot of difficulty, so
I
we're trying
understand.
we feel like we need to, and so that, because a lot of people don't have the history here, that is the very reason that the city did the reform in the first place, because when these benefits that were put into place, when the commission and the financial team involved at that time, right, said yes to them, they were looking at what they cost next year, right? And there were sort
Okay.
of blinders on of the long-term costs. So I think the city wants to be very careful not to make that mistake again.
Okay, so and I'm trying to anticipate, because when we go back in the room and we're discussing this, these are gonna be the questions that come up.
Sure.
And since we started negotiations, we said pension is number one, and we wanted to, what kind of guarantee are you gonna offer? When's this study gonna be done? Because we don't wanna sit here, if these guys decide to go to the 2-year, well, it's gonna take another year or two before we get there. When is the study gonna be requested, and when is it gonna be done? Because otherwise, it's all hypothetical, and then I don't want these guys sitting here staring at us going, well, we gave them the 2 years, and then we're right back in the same position because the study's not been done.
Still paying 9%.
Still paying 9%. So I want you to see that from our side and the concerns, because these are gonna be questions that are asked.
I can appreciate that. I mean, I think, are you okay if I address this? So depending on what we're talking about, whether we're talking about, 2-year contract or a 3-year contract, I think we can commit to a date by which that study would be done, because we would be looking at, really looking at probably 2 studies. One by the pension board's actuary, because that's required.
Right,
And one by a second actuary to confirm, right?
right.
So that we can say definitively, this is as good of an estimate as we can get. And it wouldn't be a 1-year cost study, it would have to be probably a 20-year cost study, right? So I think those studies probably would take maybe 3 to 4 months to get it done, right? Because a
Okay.
second actuary needs to get that information. Foster can do it pretty quick, they can do it in a month, but a second actuary would be several months. So I think we could make some commitment of, if we ratify a contract and it's approved by the commission and the union on this date, then 6 months from that time frame, we would have the studies we need and shared, right?
Right.
So that we can start those conversations. Pre-bargaining, I don't know, I'm gonna leave that to Claire to address that. But
Well, I think it's important to have that, because right now, we're in disagreement about certain things. And to have
Sure.
two unaffiliated parties come in and have a look and see, tell what's gonna cost, it'll be good for the commission to take a look at, it'll be good for the
Good for
bargaining to take a
everybody.
look at. That's if we go that way, but these are, I just wanna make sure that we're clarified, that these are the things that, when we go back in the room, or the bargaining unit has questions, I wanted to make sure, because, again, they're not gonna be happy if, like, we come back, so that's the
We can-
reason.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as Mark mentioned, doing the 2-year agreement versus the reopener gives you some assurances, because that's a very different scenario than just having a reopener, right?
Mhm. Well, again, it doesn't affect the three of us over here, but the bargaining is, so that's a decision that they're gonna have to make, but they need to have all the information out there. And I can tell you, I would be upset if we get back into it, they decide to do this, and then we're into, they decide to do the 2-year, and then we look at this, and then we're still waiting for another 6, 7, 8, 9 months for a study to be done.
And I think we're open to, you know, what your needs are there.
Here's my concern. Your vast majority of officers are on the bare minimum. So the city's making the minimum contribution for their pension, if their pension is the bare minimum. But you're asking them to keep their contribution to the city 4% higher than the statutory minimum on the hope that you guys will change the pension when we've gone a whole year of this with stating, we don't have an appetite for pension, we don't have an appetite for pension, we don't have an appetite for pension. So why would they agree to keep the contribution at 9% rather than the 5% statutory? What assurance, what guarantee do they have that something's gonna change?
Well, and I'll step outside what Claire said at the beginning, that we really did not want to debate the legal issues.
We're not.
Well, but we are in a sense, but I need to make this comment. You are working on the assumption, and presumably the bargaining unit is working on the assumption that you can force us, you keep saying 5% the contribution, that you can force us to 5%. And
Forget
our,
about that.
right, our position is you can't, so
But-
we've got a contract that's offered 9% for
Forget about that
the
issue.
last 10 years, and we're just saying, let's keep that as we look at this issue.
Forget about that issue. What I asked is, why would they agree to do that with no assurances, no guarantees? What guarantee do they have that something's gonna change? Because otherwise, why would they agree to more than 5%? If we go to an impasse, they can only impose 5%.
Well, that's what we disagree with, that we can only impose 5%. We don't.
Well, you can read the
agree
statute,
legally.
it says that they have to agree to pay anything more than 5%, and anything less than 5%, the city has to agree to accept less than 5%. That's the verbiage.
They have agreed to more than 9%. They have agreed, more than 5%, they have agreed to 9%.
Mhm.
And they agreed to that with no promise, no impasse or anything else. So you say, why would they?
But what
I
I'm
guess the
asking,
question is, why did they? They did.
what
But
I'm
more
asking
importantly-
right now, why would they do it?
Well-
How could I convince them to pay that much more?
Well,
for
I'll take
nothing?
a stab. I mean, I can't convince them, and I don't know the answer as to why they should or shouldn't, except I would say this. We think we have a good package on the table. We've worked hard to get where we are. The wages are good. If we don't get an agreement, then the wages are delayed. They may not be retroactive. Our proposal is it's retro to $1.73 now, but we know impasse is gonna take, what, 4 to 6 months, probably? So the advantage is, by the time it goes to impasse, we'll be back in bargaining and talking about this. So the reason to do it is, you get the good wage increases now, the other changes we've done, which is the 80/84 and other things that the contract has. And we get that in place. It fosters a better relationship. It fosters a better relationship with the commission. They see you all willing to work with us. As we said, it's the first IUPA contract. Let's get that under our belt. the commission sees that IOOP is willing to work with us, good wages are put in place, and they're better off by voting and ratifying this. That's why they would vote.
But just for the record, I want to make sure that when we go back into our caucus, that every one of these guys was told everything that you just said. So they completely understand. So it's not us that are here that don't work for the city of Ormond. They're making an informed decision, and they've been told everything that you just said.
Well, he asked why would they do it.
But I just want to make
I'm saying
sure.
Get a contract.
I just want to make sure that
Cement
the
the
commission
relationship
understands.
and get the wages in their pockets. That's why you would do it. And if that's not enough, because if you go to impasse, there's no guarantee you get pension reform. So 6 months from now, the commission could still not grant the increase. And in
Correct.
our view, not reduce the contribution.
Yes.
I know we got to leave. So that's the balance. Let's move forward, get the money in the pocket, get a deal, show that we're continuing to work together, and it makes it a more positive atmosphere for next year. And we are willing to commit to look at it, going to, as Claire said, going to the 2-year deal instead of a reopener is, can be perceived as a positive sign. There is no guarantee what's going to happen. We both understand that. But that's why they would do it. Let's get this done, cement the relationship, and get good wage increases in their pocket.
So we'll go talk. We'll be right back.
All right.
Hey, Brian.